If you guys can't hear me, just give me a shout. So my name is Bastiaan. I'm from Blockimmo, and I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you for showing up, and I'm really excited to tell you more about what we've been building. And when I say we, I quickly want to introduce you to Mike, which is our lead developer. You want to stand up, Mike? There you go. And Jesse, he does everything you will be seeing. So now I have to, you did that. Thank you, sir. Blockimmo is a platform for real estate investments. And the name obviously comes from blockchain, and immo is the German word for real estate. And you might have heard that there's been various cases in the news where there were claims that real estate has been tokenized and transacted. And the funny thing, what I always found out, that you couldn't find any transactions. So if you look on the Ethereum blockchain, for example, there were no visible traces of these cases. And today I want to show you a case where we tokenized our first building. That was on the 1st of March in Switzerland, in Zug. And I'm just going to give you a high-level overview, and then you can interrupt me, but afterwards you obviously can also ask questions how we did that. So funny enough, the property was called Hello World, or still is. And as you can see here, there is like an overview page of this property. And let me just quickly refresh the page. There we go. So what is important for making an investment in real estate is that you know what are the data and what is the return on investment. And we basically show a summary on the left side where the building is located, and there's a ton of paperwork on the bottom here, which should give you the opportunity to do the due diligence. So this property was sold in a so-called club deal to four investors, and the complete transaction has been taking place on the Ethereum blockchain. And as a means of currency, we used a stablecoin called crypto franc, and that's the digital Swiss franc on the blockchain, which has been issued by Bitcoin Swiss, another pioneer in Zug, and their daughter company is called Swiss Crypto Tokens. So what I talked about before, I'm just going to show you now. So with Blockimmo, every property has its own smart contract. And if we have a look on Etherscan, you will see that this is the smart contract of Hello World. What is significant is that the Swiss land register has something which is called a plot number, and we use the plot number as a token identifier. So here you will see Switzerland, then the canton of Zug, and then the plot number, which is 4133. And you also find this in the due diligence documents in the land register at CERT. In addition, we also use the eGrid number, which is up here. And for each property, we create 1 million tokens. What is important for this first case is that we tokenized 20% of the building value. So 20% of the building value was tokenized and then sold to 4 investors. And also here, you will see that in the contract of the crowd sale, you can actually see the traces of all the transactions. So down here, you'll see the investment. And for example, this transaction was 1.3 million going into the crowd sale during the private offering of this club deal. And then shortly after, the security tokens, so the tokens of this building, were distributed to the 4 investors. And I think that's summarizing the transaction on chain, high level. And what is important to know is that our platform is regulatory compliant. We did a ruling with 2 financial regulators, one in Switzerland and one in Liechtenstein. And in order to acquire and invest in these properties, you have to be onboarded. And in order to onboard, you have to log in with your wallet. So I'm I'm going to log in now with a wallet which is not whitelisted yet. And I think Mike also wants to be up front here, so.
Yeah, I did that on purpose.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Cheers. So, there we go. So, in order to log in, you have to sign a message in your MetaMask wallet, and this is a first time where we are certain that you are owning your private keys. And once you've done this, we will redirect you to your profile page and ask you to go through what we call a verification process, where two elements are most important. So one of them is the whole AML part, where we ask for your source of funds. And the last part is where we do the KYC check. And maybe most of you have heard of ID Now. This is basically where you do or take a picture of your ID, the back and front, the watermarks, etc., etc. And if you don't go through this process, you're not whitelisted, so you can't participate in these crowd sales. And this also means if you're smart and you think, well, we're not going to use your graphical user interface, and we're just going to send it directly to the smart contract, it will fail. So our checks are on-chain. If you're not in the whitelist on-chain, which is a separate smart contract, you can't access the crowd sale, you can't access tokens, and you can't receive tokens. And I think that's quite important. And yeah, we call it a whitelist. It's probably a wrong word, because the longer the list gets, the slower it might get. So it's more like a mapping, what we do. So there's no speed problems in that sense. So let's have a quick look at a wallet which is whitelisted, which is Mike's. So I'm going to log in again. And if I go to Mike's profile, you'll see that here's tier 1. So he can invest up to 100,000. And we blur out the private data, just in case you're with friends at the computer. But just to prove that it's Mike, you'll see here that he's from Illinois, the US. And yeah, what's also interesting, what I've showed you so far is the primary market, so where you can acquire tokens of a building. What we also built is the complete secondary market. And as a demonstration, we have a property called Matsu, which we tokenized and sold, I think 3 weeks ago, for 2,150 DAI. So again, these are no real numbers, but it's just to illustrate the functionality. And on the right side here, you will see that you're able to trade these tokens. So if, for instance, I can buy maybe 1,000 of these property tokens, and again, this is all off-chain. I'm going to speed up the transaction a little bit, on-chain. And you'll see that the transaction is mining up here. And in addition, you can also get an email confirmation with all the details of the trade you just did. So let's see how fast this goes. You also get a notification, as you can see right here. And once the transaction is confirmed, there we go. Oh yeah. So you also see it's a little bit tiny because the order wasn't too big, but there's a slight increase in price, obviously depending on the amount of liquidity that there is. Thank you. And it's really interesting, right? It's pretty sick when you think that you can trade an asset in this way without a wealth manager, without a bank, from your private home with your own connection, your own wallet, within a couple of minutes. So yeah, that's the buying part. I can also demonstrate the selling, but it basically works exactly the same. And again, it's all completely done on chain. So if you look at this transaction here, you will see that the 1,000 tokens we just talked about are transferred to your wallet. Yeah, so I think in really short, high level, real estate, tokenization, primary market, secondary market, live, up and running, and yeah, that's Blockimmo in short. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bastiaan. We're going to have some questions now. Okay, we're going to run to the back. Here we go. Start at the back, work to the front.
I've got a question about the depreciating cost. If you've got a property, you're going to have ground rent, right? Does your smart contract feed that through on an annual basis to the person who's running?
So I think in a first step, we're working with normal management companies. So it's you can call it, it's more like an indirect investment. So the property is managed by professionals. If there's a surplus, we divide the dividends through the smart contract, but we don't do any of these kind of detailed things yet on chain. We don't see a need for that as a start. And we might consider something different in a couple of years when a lot of other things are solved first.
If I tokenize my house and sell tokens to my kids, do I have to pay inheritance tax?
So that's a really good question. What we are, for a reason, we're starting with investment properties because it's easier to understand. And this first case is just for the owner to generate liquidity without taking out another mortgage or high fees or loans. Further down the road, we will enable that you can tokenize your private property, just like you said before. So imagine there, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, the bank usually finances up to 60-70%. And suddenly you can tokenize the other 20-30%, yeah, and get liquidity out of that. The whole legal side of things with inheritance, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure it's not different than how the world functions now. So in the end, you have a trace of ownership. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I was just wondering how the tokens legally enforce ownership.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we did a ruling with 2 financial regulators, as I mentioned before. And one of the key elements is that per tokenization, per property, we will have to write a prospectus. And in there, you will find in a transparent way all the legal side of things. One of them is the transfer of ownership. And what I can say is that if it's a public offering, as we have planned, then we wrap the assets into a global certificate. And there's a way how you can transfer ownership completely paperless using that method. So we have a blog post on our blog. We're very transparent about that. And that's also why we got the green light, I think. It's a very clean way to exactly solve this problem. Whereas in a lot of jurisdictions, you still have the obligation to have a writing, so a signature on a page. With a global certificate, you don't have this problem. But again, this is legal stuff. We solved it, and there's a lot of information on our blog if you want to know more.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I was just wondering as well, so if you sell those tokens to somebody else, does the ownership automatically transfer?
So what was the second part of this one?
So if I bought the equity and then I sold my tokens to somebody else, would the ownership automatically transfer?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So in the prospectus, you will find that the traces on the public Ethereum blockchain is where you agree that your ownership is transferred to another wallet. And back in our system, we can identify the wallet because you're being through our onboarding process. You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Here we go.
I just had a thought. The tokens are obviously like bearer-like instruments, right? Most crypto assets. How do you handle? Do you expect there to be any issues with tokens, say, being misused, sent from hackers or anything else of that nature?
So, I mean, I think you have to be a little bit more exact. So first the hacker has to onboard, be whitelisted.
Right, I understand the whitelist probably greatly mitigates that sort of threat.
Right.
And obviously, if they're sending it to someone, you presume they're already whitelisted.
Right.
But say, for example, someone gets through your whitelist in terms of, you know, they have fake KYC documents or something other to that, and they can access the liquidity pool near instantly because obviously the main benefit of crypto assets is well, one of the main benefits is you can get in and out very quickly. And if you have any sort of backup plans in terms of liability for that.
Okay, yeah, you're forgetting one important step, and that is acquiring the tokens. So if these kind of assets, we're talking about millions of Swiss francs or dollars or euros. So yeah, you have to be quite interested in doing something wrong. But to answer your question, do we have a solution if people lose their private keys or if they by accident send tokens somewhere? I would say for private keys we have. So it's opt-in because we believe in the decentralized way of doing things. So if you trust us to have a backup or a way to regenerate your tokens, then we can facilitate that. If you send the tokens to a wrong address, I think that's highly unlikely. I mean, again, these have to be whitelisted. Yeah, so in that sense, I think that's an edge case which is not so relevant at the moment. Yeah.
How legally enforceable is this investment? So, like, will it hold up in court if there's contention between two investors? And secondly, how scalable is it? So, take for example, is the same smart contract that you use for this property, is the same smart contract that you use for property in Spain, or will you have to spin up a new smart contract? How does that work?
So to your first question, in the end, we're using a highly regulated document, right? A prospectus. So in the prospectus, everything is organized, and there is no room for conflicts between investors. So you as a token holder in a property, like I mentioned before, it's an indirect investment, and it's not that you can go and say, I don't want that lamp which is not working anymore not to be changed. So there's a certain barrier, so the management company can do its work. And what's also important that with each property smart contract, we have attached the DAO. So if there is a case where we need a voting, we can enable people to do so through our platform. And then the more tokens you hold, the more weight your vote has. So that's like a virtual assembly, if you like. Second question, help me quickly, what was it?
No, exactly.
Oh, the scalability.
So would it be a different smart contract for every deal? Or is it like a master smart contract that breaks stuff out across the jurisdictions?
There's definitely a master smart contract up to a certain height. In the beginning, we will adapt to every jurisdiction, depending on how their structure is, either on the land register side or on the legal side of things. So maybe I need to talk to Mike, but maybe we can reuse 70% of the functionality. The other 30% we have to change parameters. But it's still 98. There you go. Even better. So yeah, it's definitely scalable. Everything, all the intelligence is on the blockchain level. We have a very lightweight backend. We're completely serverless. We're using AWS. It's going to be probably one of the fastest dApps you'll ever see.
So as a buyer, what's the benefit for me to buy through you rather than through another process? How much less money does it cost me, and how do you generate revenue?
Right, so if you look in the traditional real estate, this is not possible. So the closest what you probably will find is a REIT or an investment fund, and which is always a mixture of certain properties. If you're lucky in the same area, usually spread all over a country. So here you can say, I believe in this street number in this area in Zurich, and I want to invest in Frankfurt and in Amsterdam at this street, and these are the locations I believe will grow over the next years. And as a second benefit, you profit from the rent income, obviously. And comparing costs, I think you just saw the transaction cost is probably 30 cents. Obviously, we introduce ourselves as a new middleman, and at the moment, we have a transaction fee of 1% for each transaction, which is probably in every jurisdiction, at least I know of, at least half or even more less than any other middleman you will find. So that's one key element of our business model. Obviously, we take a management fee of the dividends which are distributed, and we have a couple of other let's say, revenue models, which I'm not going to share today, but they're more for the long term because we want to remove ourselves as a middleman on the long term and still be able to generate money. And this is where really cool products like Compound.finance come in, Maker, and we all have them integrated. So also this you will find on our blog. Yeah.
Awesome. Next question then. We're going to take one over here. Are you currently ready or regulated to tokenize property in the UK?
That's a good question. So we are actively looking for partners in every jurisdiction which is not Switzerland. The regulators are already having a hard time, to put it politely, to understand what we're doing. So if we're going to tell people at the regulators that we're going to do something international, then it's just a big no. So what would really help is old world crowdfunding real estate platforms. They already have the licenses and they can basically apply this within a day and get started.
Okay, so assuming you have the right partner, you don't think there's too long of a lead time to start utilizing this platform?
We signed the first white label deal with another country 4 weeks ago, and we're probably going to announce it. Well, I'm saying it now, but officially announce it at the end of March. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm here.
Hi there.
So just want to clarify. So you are issuing securities for each company, or you basically, like, in what securities investing to those investors, right? Is it security issued by each company, or it's your securities? So actually you are issuing shares and bonds. What kind of instrument?
Right. So to my knowledge, there's no country yet who has a legal definition of a token. And as long that is not the case, the token is just a shell. And you can put any existing financial instrument in there as long as you stick to the regulatory environment. And that's the cool thing about our model. We support SPVs, like this deal, but our higher aim for public offerings is a fund, and that's exactly what we did a ruling for. So why a fund? With a fund, you're talking about a highly regulated instrument. Each property will have its own sub-fund, and you don't have to trust me as the owner or the management director of a company that we will do what we promise we say we do. So if you put a property in an SPV in a public offering, on day 1 you can collect the funds. On day 2 you buy the property and distribute the security tokens. On day 3 the management is corrupt, sells the building, and your tokens are worthless. So that's why for public offerings we highly suggest, or at least we are moving into the direction of a fund. And a fund is, again, it's a regulated instrument. There's a depot bank involved, you have a fund manager. So in theory, and you have a fund ownership, of course, with people sitting in there, publicly known. So in theory, all 4 of them have to be corrupt in order to do something against the will of the token holders.
So there will be a prospectus of your fund, right?
Exactly. Each property has its own sub-fund. That's really important. So we're not mixing any properties together. If one property burns down, highly unlikely, but let's say it as an example, all the other properties are not affected, not legally, not on token level.
It's one of the solutions. And then another question about a license for secondary market. Do you have a license for secondary market?
So the cool thing is in Switzerland that if you want to do full-fledged trading, you have to have a banking license or a security dealer license, but they allow you to do secondary trading, let's call it bulletin board style. So the clear definition is that the transaction should take place outside of your platform. And as you could see in our demo before, the transaction takes place on the blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, has nothing to do with Blockimmo, and therefore it's outside of our platform. And that's peer-to-peer, right? We're actively working on a second project, which is called STX, Security Token Exchange. And there we are building a fully fledged security token exchange, fully regulated. And yeah, we hope to also there be a little bit more specific in the upcoming months. Yeah.
Last question, please.
Hi, Robert Olsen. Just want to say thanks for coming over. Really enjoyed your presentation and kudos for doing a demo that worked. A couple of things. Can you not just tell us which jurisdiction you've signed?
You mean the white label deal?
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Come on! It's world first. Secondly, you talk about partnerships. If anyone internal information not needed, might be interested in having a chat.
All right.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. So, Bastiaan Don, what do you got for us?
Thank you.